Friend, did you watch Imperfect Women episode 5? Oh, girl. The scandalosity was scandalous, honey. Look, come on in here and let's break this down because we got a lot to talk about. Imperfect Women episode 5 did not disappoint. Now, this was another Nancy focused episode. Remember, the first 3 episodes were kind of the events leading up to Nancy's death. Well, the past 2 episodes have been all about Nancy. Last episode was about Nancy's upbringing. It was about her lavish, annual party and flashbacks of her traumatic childhood and all the things. But this week, baby, it was about Louise and David. All right. Now, who is Louise and David? Now, you remember at the end of last episode when Nancy and Mary's husband, Howard, were sitting down, outside on the patio after the party, and he came to pick up something. And they were talking about that art director named Phil, who actually gave Howard a job at the party. Somehow Phil keeps calling Howard David, right? And in some way he keeps calling Nancy Louise. So now this is Louise and David. And that's how we all knew, is Mary's husband the real David? Will the real David please stand up? So episode 5 takes us through what happened between Nancy and Howard. How did everything go down? How did he become David? Now, we learned from last episode that Nancy is a ballet dancer. She grew up doing ballet. Ballet was heavily tied to like her childhood. And she actually got this creative director role for this ballet for this company that she essentially is on the board and donated money to. That's how her and the art director Phil are friends. So I love the fact that they opened with that they opened with the whole ballet part of it all, because to me, the art of ballet, to me, it signified, or it was a metaphor for Nancy's life, right? Because she mentioned that, because of ballet, she's learned how to tolerate pain. She's learned how to dance through the pain. And also she's also learned how to put on a performance, right? Because we know she comes from humble beginnings, honey. She does not come from money. Her childhood was up. Her mom was crazy. Her stepfather was a pedophile and she was having a relationship with him, and her mom tried to kill her. So she comes from a rocky background. So she is for sure been putting on a performance, as being Robert's trophy wife and living this lavish life and being this socialite and all the things. So just to kind of hone in on that whole theme, there's several points in this episode where she's simply just tolerating like pain and basically tolerating being dismissed. She was dismissed by her husband in this episode, when Nancy and Robert went over to Mary and Howard's house for dinner. Robert was very rude to her, called her stupid. Robert also calls her creative directing role in the ballet a little volunteer thing. She kind of just sucked that up and, kept it moving, even though it hurt her feelings. Even down to the art director, Phil, who cannot remember her name, even though she donates so much money to the cause. He keeps calling her Louise, totally disrespectful. And when she pitched that she had a lookbook for the ballet, he threw her lookbook in the trash, okay? She found it in the trash. She didn't say anything about it. She just kind of took it and kept it moving. It almost feels like pain is part of like the choreography, right? And even so, like before when I said that ballet was like heavily tied to her childhood, she's finding herself being in a situation where it is forcing her to look at her past, the past that she's been trying to run away from the whole time, the past she's been trying to hide with all of her Giuseppe shoes and all the rich things and living in the grand house. That's starting to come to the forefront. She had a moment of vulnerability when she looked up her stepfather, who was a pedophile, just to touch base with him. She reached out to him on Instagram. So she sparked up this old trauma. Then she decided she didn't want to do that. She didn't want to go down that road. And then she blocked him. So throughout this series, he's like blowing her up. He's basically texting her and calling her and like, yo, you reached out to me. So that kind of starts a pattern for Nancy where she knows something is not for her. She knows something is toxic. She knows something is painful, but she keeps running back to it and she keeps enduring it. Another moment of, her just kind of facing her past and her trauma is whenever she went to get that painting and that artist took a picture of her and he was like, let me, put your hair behind your shoulder. And she was saying like, I have a scar, like I don't need my scar on display. And he's like, show the scar. You know, she's really trying to hide her wounds that are deeply, deeply rooted to how she grew up. And that, to me, it just signified that further. She kind of refuses to confront what really has hurt her. She just brushes things off. She puts on the ballet shoes, honey. She points her toes and she just keeps it moving. But with all this being said, whenever she starts to become friends with Howard, it's kind of like he was a godsend, right? He was doing all the right things. So this is how it started. So of course, Howard got the job working with as a historical philosopher or something for the ballet that Nancy is the creative director for. Mary calls Nancy and is like, I need you to come pick up Howard to go to, y'all's tech rehearsals or whatever, because his car is in the shop. So day one, Nancy picks up Howard. And this is the first time Nancy and Howard have ever spent time together alone without Mary or any of their other spouses. So at first, Nancy's kind of like, I ain't got time to be babysitting somebody's broke ass husband. Like, he ain't got, you know what I mean? Like, I don't have time to be babysitting him. And that's kind of the energy that she had initially. But then, they start going to these tech rehearsals together, spending more time together. And I think we all saw this coming. It seemed like for a minute that Howard was like a really good guy. I was sitting there thinking like, he is so sweet. Oh my God, he's such a good guy. Like, he was being so supportive of her. He was complimenting her. He gave her this book of poems. It said something like Catalyst or something like that. And it's supposed to be like this poet that writes these like sensual kind of like edgy poems. So I'm like, okay, what does that mean? And he noticed that her notebook, she was running out of pages. So then he bought her a new notebook. He was just doing all these sweet things. And in the beginning, I thought it was just genuine gestures. I thought, they're just becoming friends. They're getting to know each other in a different way. They're working closely together. They have a lot of interests, specifically for historical context and ballet and Greek, because I think the ballet was like a Greek story or something like that. So they started spending a lot of time together at this whole ballet company. And, as he's showing up for her and being friends with her and, doing all these sweet things, Nancy starts to kind of come around the bend and being like, Howard's a cool guy. Like, I was blowing him off before, but maybe that says more about me than it does him. Because, obviously Howard is broke, and Nancy is all about that trophy wife life. So, maybe she had some judgments towards him in the beginning, but their friendship starts to take a turn. I think it initially started to take that turn when Howard asked Nancy to go to the movies with him. They got out of tech rehearsal early, and he asked her to go see this 1948 British film called The Red Shoes. And it's about a ballet. It's about this ballet dancer named Vicky. And essentially, she has a choice to make. She either can choose love or she can choose ballet. But either way, whatever she chooses is going to lead to her demise. So it's not just like she chose ballet because she loves the art of it. It became like a compulsion. It became like an obsession. And that again made sense to me as how it relates to Nancy's life. Because Nancy's kind of doing the same thing. Like, she can either choose to keep performing for Robert and be the trophy wife and all the things, or she can be her real self, the real self that she's been trying to hide this whole time. Howard and Nancy are getting to know each other better, asking each other like real personal questions. And Howard knows that her stepfather has been like blowing her up, and she's venting to him about it. And she reveals to him that, yeah, I was f***ing my stepdad. And then Howard, I really did like the fact that he corrected her though. He said, no, you mean you were assaulted, which is more true because Nancy was a minor at the time. But she starts confiding in him about this story that she feels very shameful about. And she tells him, she was like, I reached out to him recently, and ever since then he's been blowing me up. She's like, I don't know why I did that. And Howard's like, yeah, you do. You know exactly why you did that. You're tired of putting on the performance. You're tired of putting on the red ballet shoes. You're tired of being this trophy wife, this surface level diva, when really you love the thrill. I think he called her a fire starter. You love the thrill. And she admitted, I love the danger. Yes, I love the thrill. It excites me, et cetera, et cetera. Lord have mercy. And then, child, Then child, they had sex. Child, Howard and Nancy had sex. Mary's husband was up there. They had 8 weeks to get this ballet together, and Howard was knocking Nancy down for 4 of them. At least 4 of them. They had sex the one time, it was over. Then every time you turn around, Nancy and Howard was sneaking and having sex. They was having sex in the car. They was having sex in the dressing room. They were having sex everywhere behind Mary and Robert's back. For some reason, Nancy is at Mary's house. It's Nancy, Mary, and Eleanor. They meet up to talk about, I forget, maybe they talk about Marcus or something like that. And Nancy can't even face Mary because she know what she's done. And she's acting like really weird. And she's like, I gotta go. I feel sick. And Eleanor approaches her and is like, wait, what's going on? And Nancy tells Eleanor that she cheated, that she's having an affair. But she doesn't say who. She doesn't say I'm having an affair with Mary's husband, Howard. She says, I'm having an affair with this guy named David. Of course, Eleanor's like, what are you doing, girl? Like, you need to get it together. But that explains why in the first episode, Nancy didn't want Eleanor to tell Mary about her having the affair because she was Mary's husband. That's why. That's the real reason why she didn't want Mary to know. After she'd been turning Howard every which way but loose, she goes to Robert's family dinner. And in the last episode, they were being really weird. The Hennessey family was being really weird. They kept talking about this meeting in New York and how did it go. And then Nancy found like this email that said something about divorcing. And so this whole time she's thinking Robert is about to leave her. He's about to divorce her. There's something sketchy going on. So she finds out during that dinner, actually what's going on is Robert fucked up at work. He ended up like signing this business or investing in this business and lost a ton of money. So now because of that, he has to spend his portion of the trust to cover those funds. So essentially he's broke. Him and Nancy broke, and Nancy don't even know it yet. So, he explains to Nancy like, yeah, I did mess up. I know this isn't what you signed up for. I know you signed up for the money, the lifestyle, etc. And Nancy's like, I just want you. I don't care about the money, blah, 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 blah. So then her and Robert reconcile. They make up. Mind you, she been Howard for weeks. So she gets back in good with her husband, and then she starts kind of blowing Howard off. So I guess the opening night of the ballet, everyone's there. Mary and Howard are there. Nancy and Robert is there. Eleanor is there. They're all there to watch this. And so Howard peeps that Nancy and Robert are all over each other, all lovey-dovey and laughing and giggling and stuff. And he's pissed off because he's been trying to text and call Nancy, and she's been blocking him just like she blocked her stepfather after reaching out to him. So Nancy goes to the bathroom. Of course, Howard follows her and confronts her about it. And this is where things take a turn. So this whole time, I've been thinking like, Howard is such a good guy. He's such a nice guy. He's doing all these sweet things for Nancy. I am embarrassed to admit that I kind of wanted Nancy and Howard to be together for a second. It just felt like a very good pairing. It felt right. But baby, when he confronted her in that bathroom, we saw the dark side of Howard. He basically threatened her. Well, he was trying to sleep with her, and he threatened her and was like, well, how about I tell Robert who his wife really is? And he was like, all like touching her. Nancy was saying like, we need to move on. It was just a thing. We need to move on. And Howard was like, you don't get to tell me that it's over. You don't get to tell me that. He grabs her arm. Like he was really aggressive with her and scary. So after that went down, I was like, oh my God, Howard might not be who we think he is. And I started thinking about all the sweet stuff that he was doing for her. Was he grooming her? Was he slowly grooming her? Was he love bombing her? Was this all a play? Was this all manipulation? Maybe it wasn't genuine. Maybe he knew that there were problems between Robert and Nancy, and he thought he'd try to slide in there and see what he can get. And now that she's trying to call it quits, he's not having it. So they get home, her and Robert, and she's thinking to herself, like, I have got to, now that we're cool, we're good, we're back together, I have got to tell Robert the truth about Howard. And before she can do that, Howard starts blowing Nancy's phone the up with all these intimate photos of her and him together. So somehow Robert grabs the phone before Nancy can get it, and she sees the photos. So he goes off and he confronts her about it. He's like, I can't believe this, blah, 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 blah. And he gets scary too. He like almost hits her. He throws something against the wall, and it's very, very scary. It freaks Nancy out. So she runs out of the house and jumps in the car and drives away. Now, as she's driving away, Mary is around the corner in her car, like staking out the situation, and then she proceeds to follow Nancy. And then the episode ends. So, did Mary know that her best friend Nancy was fucking her husband Howard? And it also made me think of towards the beginning, whenever Mary called Nancy and was like, hey, can you do me a favor? Can he ride with you? His car is in the shop. And she pulled up. She was like, yeah, sure. And then Mary was like, thank you so much. She was like, I really think I needed this more. I needed it more than he did. She mentioned something about needing him to either be working or be away from the house or be away from her. I'm not quite sure, but she said something cryptic like that. So then that had me thinking like, well, damn, did Mary plan all this? She's the one that had Nancy put Howard onto a new gig at this ballet that she knew Nancy would be working at, and she knew they would be spending a lot of time together. Was this Mary's intention the whole time? I don't know, y'all. It could be anybody. At this point, it's either Mary, Howard, or Robert. But you know how they do. It can't be that simple. It cannot be that simple. You guys tell me what you thought about this episode, what you thought about the ballet references, the red shoes of it all the themes that were underlying this episode, Nancy's commitment to performing to death, even if it comes at her demise. Let me know what your theories are in the comments. I'm ready to chat about this today, okay? I've been wanting to talk to somebody about this since Wednesday, okay? Because this was so scandalous, honey. Oh, girl. It's the right amount of messiness for me. It was my type of messiness, honey. Tap in.